Hello viewers and welcome to the morning programs, news and current affairs. The program is the Dailies on Eco Television International, where we look at various stories trending on our Nigerian newspaper. And we know we just have about 3 days to the presidential campaign, and also when Nigeria will be celebrating 62 of years of independence. That is really a big one for us, right? So we learn to really have to look at what we have to do to make Nigeria the great country we want it to be. I'm Sele Elisha Dasham and Rachel Tanzit here with me. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Sele.
So what are your plans? Independent is just, about 5 days.
It's usually a day I just relax.
Okay.
And I don't go out for rallies. I've always wanted to dress in white and green, but it never happens. So let's see this year if I'll get to dress that way.
You have the opportunity to dress that way, right? So. Well, let's say as patriotic citizens, so we just do all we have to do. Well, we are live on Facebook and also on YouTube, so you can actually join the conversation later on, and also at 9:30 we'll open the phone lines where you can call us and let us hear what your views are concerning most of the stories that are trending on our paper. I'll be starting with the Blueprint newspaper. The first story here: flood. 7 die, 1,300 households destroyed, 2,800 displaced in Kwara. The writer following that story, we have 1,000 homeless in Kogi and Niger. And you know, Rachel, this is not the first time we're seeing the story. The stories have been trending. Flood has really, taken lots of life and properties this year. And not just in Nigeria, funny enough. We saw where flood have actually done lots of havoc, even in some African countries and even outside Africa. The rain this year has really been very heavy. And I know that Neiman tried their best to actually synthesize, give sensitization to people, what they need to do to prevent the flood. And we, even here on the show, we kept talking about making sure that our drainages are free so that water can actually have a free passage. We also spoke about people building by the waterways. We saw where people build houses by the water, and then what happened at the end of the day. And we saw where communities had to vacate where they're living because of this flood. And we can see about 1,300 households have been destroyed. Yes. It was funny enough, you know, where we are expecting places, cities like Lagos and the likes of them, but we're seeing that most of these northern states that usually do not have so much of rainfall, actually the states that have been affected by the flood this year. So you could see that a lot needs to be done. I know the NEMA have tried their best, but much more needs to go into making sure people are being enlightened about what they need to do so that we can prevent this flood come next year. Because if food have been destroyed, then food crisis is actually knocking on our door. So I hope we'll do more in regards to that.
And there's a point you raised, Sele, concerning somewhere like Lagos is not getting flooded, and it's a state that are not even close to the sea. It means there's something wrong infrastructurally. It means the government needs to take up projects to solve this issue, because you know what? Rain will not stop coming. Let's say it goes and then the place dries up. What are you doing that by next year, when the rainy season comes, this flood won't take place? As long as people keep doing what you just mentioned, like building wrongly or not enough drainages, then we will keep having issues of flood. So I feel the government, where the states where this flood really dealt with them, the government needs to make creating drainages and the way out a mega project. They shouldn't joke with it, because okay enough to evacuate the place. What about those who died? Are we going to make something like flood a big issue every year, that people have to die and properties have to be lost? No, this is something that can be done from now till the next rainy season.
Of course, Rachel. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Blueprint newspaper. Ahead of Wednesday's campaign kickoff, intrigues, anxiety train Tinubu, Atiku and Wike's chances. The writer following that story said, don't link Wike to PDP zoning crisis. The Southeast group tells Atiku. Will deliver Delta for Ashiwaju. This is coming from the BSO. And we have Obi's Labour Party has no candidate in the 25 senatorial district, 100 federal constituencies. Vote for Tinubu. Atiku remains world poverty capital, Kakochu tells Nigerians. And we have cast your votes for good governance, Makinde tax electorate. You can read all of that on page 6. NNPC opens talks with financier on gas projects. And at 62, Osinbajo gives hope, says Nigerians' future will be great. This story coming from Christina. Terrorists demand 250 million naira for the 43 kidnapped victims. Resident panic stricken. You can read all of that on page 7. And we have on the Abacha loot, Serap sues Buhari Malami over failure to publish agreements. And on 2023, court fixed September 28 for judgment in Lawan and Marchand's case. CBN's goes tough on Anchor Borrower Program loan defaulters. An ex-commissioner survived assassination attempt in Nasarawa. National Assembly summons Minister Customs CG over dysfunctional scanners. You can actually read all of that too on page 5 of the Blueprint newspaper. We have a picture story here to mark the 62 years or so of Nigeria. So you can grab the Blueprint newspaper and read any of the stories that is of interest to you.
On the New Telegraph, Nigeria's debt service to World Bank order GOP 194.6 billion naira. This is our first half report, and if you want to read more of that, just get the New Telegraph, and it's on page 23. Fundraising, stakeholders advise varsities to explore capital market. Buhari to diaspora Nigerians, give resources, talent, others back to your country. You can read more of that on page 4. Bleaching cosmetic, spa owner risks persecution over unauthorized chemical. More of that story on pages 26 and 28. Pipeline surveillance, the INC resolved Tompolo Asari Ateke rift. More of that story on page 7. Akeredolu stands on federalism, national issues, courages. As you can read more of that story on page 6. And the big story on New Telegraph, controversy trails campaign cancelled as NWC disown leagues. Plans review of PCC membership, Tinubu political associate sidelining party. You can read more of that story on page 3. And on the right side of the paper, still on the 2023 election, Tinubu procuring fake groups to divide Christians. This is coming from Baba Chirawan. You can read more of that story on pages 3, 6, and 27. Still on oil subsidy, Labour Party wants Buhari to quit. You can read more of that story on page 3 and 8. And the writer for that story, Obi, says his mission is purposeful leadership. Still on the 2023 election, Nigeria should elect competent leaders. This is coming from Sheikh Mohammed Khalid. More of what he has to say on page 6 and 11. And at the downside of the paper, PDP walks tightrope over internal wrangling. Atiku may have foreclosed peace with Wike. More of that story on pages 5, 9, and 10. Why Northern governors, monarchs supporting state policing, by Baba Ahmed. You can read more of that story on page 5. And there's a study that links smartphones' blue light to premature aging. You can read more of that story on page 8. And that's all the news on New Telegraph.
On Daily Trust newspaper, we have Nigeria must have national dream identity. This is coming from Obasanjo. Says country need unifier to address the current disunity. Nigerians' future will be great. This is coming from Osinbajo, the Vice President of Nigeria. Leadership quality decline in recruitment process faulty. This is coming from Jigar. Don't get carried away by propaganda. This is coming from Okonjo-Iweala, the DG of the World Bank. And we're having, despite high external reserve, forex pressure remains as MPC meets today. August revenue drops by 280 billion naira as federal government, states, local government share 673.137 billion naira. Army produced pamphlets to guide officers on elections. You can read all of that on page 5. And we have a picture story here where some youths actually pushing a car out of a flood in Abuja yesterday, and because the rain was actually a bit heavy in those part of the country. So we actually hope that people will look out. And we have a weekly security review from September 19th to September the 25th, 2021, from Monday down to Saturday. So you can actually take a look at the review and know what you need to do to protect yourself and also your community. And that's all on the Daily Trust newspaper.
On the Daily Independent, Nigeria Air, Ethiopian Airlines partnership gets dumbed down. Stakeholder says deal not dream career for Nigeria. Muslim ticket advocate promoting combustible agenda. This is coming from Dogara, says Tinubu, APC out to sabotage, to shortchange Christians. Ex-SGF Lawan alleges. And the big story on the Daily Independent, ballooning subsidies may worsen Nigeria's fiscal deficit woes. And you can read more of that story on page 8. And on the left side of the paper, bearish regime hits insurance stock as starting firm sells only 88 million units in 1 week. More of that report on page 7. Abacha loots. SERAP sues Buhari over failure to publish agreement with US. You can read that on page 29. Youth will be pivot of my purpose-driven administration. This is coming from Peter Obi. NSCDC decries inadequate technology to combat insecurity and oil theft. NDLEA arrests 75-year-old grandpa and 21 others over illicit drug. And you can read that on page 26. And PDP ignores Wike set to embark on campaign with IU as chairman. Party's constitution can't be jettisoned because of one man. This is coming from Epeyong, and there's a picture story where you can see Peter Obi and why Nigeria can be regarded as giant of Africa at 62. This is coming from Obasanjo. You can read more of that story on page 9. And on the downside of the paper, there's Lagos plans construction of bicycle parking terminals, and you can read how they plan on doing that on page 6. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Leadership newspaper, flood kills 7, displaced 2,800 persons in Kwara. On 2023, don't vote killers, they hacked me out in 2015. This is coming from the former President Jonathan. And we have brace up for harder times in fourth quarter, man was manufacturers. And you can actually read that what the Nigerian manufacturing sector is expecting to continue to struggle for survival as the country enters the fourth quarter of the current year. On the expectation, the manufacturer looking at stock shocks, market, and also on availability of raw materials. And you know, this is really something we need to look into, Rachel, because if we are having warning manufacturers that they should brace up for harder times, then that means consumers also have to brace up for tougher times or for hard times coming. Because if we're having raw materials being sold at a very high price, definitely for us the consumers, they will definitely increase the prices of things. And so I just hope this is the point where we need to come to look into it. October is coming, where very soon we'll enter the festive season, Christmas and all the likes of things. And you know the way things are when it gets to mostly the festive season, things are the price of things really, there's a hike in price. So I just hope that we'll look into making life very, very meaningful at the end of the day. If we are having the likes of Obasanjo saying that, because in that last paper I say why Nigeria can't be regarded as the giant of Africa at 62, then we need to go back to the drawing board and see where did we get it wrong. Let's take a look at our educational sector. Let's take a look at transport. Let's take a look at health. Let's even take a look at the security of Nigeria presently. With all this, are we going to really, really say that we are still the giant of Africa? I believe we are still the giant of Africa, but it just needs one or two touch And we really need a political will, because one thing I believe, if there is a will, there will definitely be a way out of it if you are willing to actually do something. So I believe that if we are willing to actually change the narrative of the way things are, it's not about hearing manifestos coming from all these politicians. Definitely from Wednesday, we're going to hear lots of that coming up, what they want to do. But I'm looking forward to that candidate that will come to tell what the plans they actually have. Something very workable. It's not just about lip services, but we're hoping to see someone that can actually do something at the end of the day. How you can wipe the tears of somebody that is actually, you know, surviving on just selling perishable goods on her table to be able to survive with her family member. We're looking for where we can see power will be constant at the end of the day. We're looking forward to a day where you can actually sit down and there you don't even have to shut your doors because you're not afraid of kidnappers or even robbers. So I hope that we'll still go back to that Nigeria, that color that when you see green and white, it has always been my favorite color, you know, and it's still my favorite color. But let it not just be about being your favorite color, but it should be about the flag, that I can raise the flag of Nigeria anywhere, that I am proud to be in Nigeria at the end of the day. We are seeing people really live in the countries, and we saw where the president is saying those living in the diaspora need to give back to their community.
Yes.
But then why should I give back to the community, or why should I give back to my country when I don't see any reason to do that at the end of the day? We need to give people reasons why they need to come back to Nigeria, why they need to give back to their community, why they need to give back to their country at the end of the day. So I just hope that whatever the issue is here, that we'll be able to address that at the end of the day.
Sele, talking about being giants of Africa, I don't think we are anymore. Are we still a popular African country? Yes. Do we have all it takes to be the giant? Yes. But at the moment, I don't think we are. We have other African countries that are coming from nothing and becoming something. And all I see is in Nigeria is just depreciation of quality. There was a time, like, our parents witness like better days, but I can say I had a witness of something called good. When we moved to where we are currently as a family, the power company that were supplying us light was called Nesco. They are still called Nesco. We had months where light won't blink for a complete 30 good days and more. Light wouldn't blink, even for one, even if it's storm that is falling, like hailstorm, whatever. But you can't boast of that anymore. I keep seeing Nigeria depreciating and moving forward. Why? Because what makes development is that you keep growing. We shouldn't be building new railroads but upgrading what we already had. Why would it be that there was a time we had rail transport system and now we don't have it anymore? That's depreciation. Growth means when you started with a locomotive engine, you probably upgrade to steam engine. And as development is going on, you upgrade to electric train system or something like that. But why are we depreciating? Why are we going back to railway like it never existed in Nigeria? And you can say that to many other sectors. We had them, but now we are starting from the beginning. It's almost like they never existed. So personally, I don't feel we are the giant of Africa. Do we have what it takes to be there? Yes, but we are depreciating. We had agriculture, we had the pyramid, the granite pyramid. Are we supposed to say we moved from farming raw granite to now taking it to finished product? We should be producing peanuts, we should have granite oil, exporting them to other countries. We should have moved from one level to another. That's what growth is and development is, but not that what was is no longer there and like we are starting from the scratch. So no, I see us depreciating and I don't feel we are giants of Africa anymore. This thing should be reviewed and should be given to another country.
No,
that
we
actually
will. I stand to say that we'll still maintain that giant of Africa, Rachel, regardless of what it is. All we need is that political will and we'll change the narrative. Yes. We're still on the Leadership newspaper. We have our Leadership Twitter Spaces. We have Wiki scam insists IU must go, and you can read that on page 7. And 2 days to go, political parties reject state charges for campaigning signage billboards. You can read all of that. And we have the writer says it will make cost of campaign unbearable for candidates. Presidential governorship candidates pay between 5 million naira and 15 million naira per billboard. Others pay vary amounts. And we have smaller parties decry high charges of signage by states, where they can look that up on what they can do better for their campaign, not just about the billboards. But then no matter your billboard, do you really have what it takes to, take Nigeria to the next level? And on Nigeria Air, federal government begins recruitment ahead of the takeoff. And NEDC tackles climate change with energy efficient stoves. And at 62, the 62 independent Nigerian will be great again. This is coming from the Vice President Uzibanjo. We have a picture story here too. You do well to get the leadership newspaper and read any of the stories that is of interest to you.
On the Nigerian News Direct, still on the 2023 presidency, what will determine our choice candidate? This is coming from NEF. NAFDAC raises alarm over abuse of bleaching cosmetic. And still on Osun gubernatorial election, we're in court to deepen our democratic values. Oyatola 8. You can read more of that story on page 5. And the big story on a 93 billion naira debt. Mass disconnection looms for electricity consumers as discourse vow to go tough. Experts for discuss NERC for Nigeria's power sector challenges. You can read more of that story on page 3. Over 60 customers emerge winners in massive Dangote cement 1 billion naira promo in Jos and Ogun State. And on the downside of the paper, desist from action that threaten Nigeria's unity, Abiodun tells Nigeria. This is still on the elections. How Glow emerged as 2022 most popular brand in Nigeria. Sanwo-Olu at Chatham House charges world leaders on sustainable healthcare system. And that's all the news on News Direct.
On the Punch newspaper, 32 firms get license to produce 762.3 megawatts, which you can read on page 25. Police seeks 123 oil vessels and others begin prosecution, and we really have to give it to the police for a well-done job. And I hope more people will be prosecuted that actually, get stealing our oils and actually taking it to other places. Nigeria's economic outlook uncertain, welfare worsened. This is coming from the World Bank. You can read that on page 25. And on the Muslim ticket, Tinubu Shaitima frustrating reconciliation, says Lawan. 7 Lagos passengers burnt in crash, firefighters attacked. Well, I hope we'll do more, because last week we saw that on Abuja, yes, and today we're seeing another one on Lagos. More needs to be done to actually check, and I think this is where the road safety and all that are in charge of the road actually have to check the road and the cars before they actually, get on the road. Are they pliable enough? Can we actually use them and all that? Need to check the safety and even check the psychology of these drivers that actually drive the car. You imagine a driver driving maybe from Kano to Abuja, and he's trying to catch up in next, trying to drive again just to get more money and passengers, and at the end of the day we can see what happened. Well, I hope we'll actually check more into that, and the road safety will do more to check all of that too. Still on the Punch newspaper, Lagos Ibadan traffic, police kidnappers exchange gunfire, travelers rescue. You can read that on page 4 and 5. And the big story, which is on politics and insecurity. Demand for bulletproof vehicle SUV. Demand overwhelmed dealers. Suppliers confirm increased demand. Sales expert worry over killings and kidnappings. Politicians' action show 2023 polls may not be violent-free. This is coming from pro-democracy groups, and actually from the look of things, demanding of bulletproof cars.
Exactly.
And looking at the fact that ASU is still on strike, lots of things need attention, and we're seeing that these politicians actually have the money to actually acquire it. It's not bad to actually have a bulletproof car,
It's not.
but then we begin to look at your priority. What is of top priority to you at the end of the day? Is it the welfare of Nigeria, or it is your own personal interest? We saw where Ifeanyi was attacked in Anambra when he went for, I think, a function. At the end of the day, the 8 that were with him were killed, and some police, people were also killed. Some policemen were killed as a result of the day. But he was safe because he was in a bulletproof car, which is not bad. But then we really need to look at our scale of preferences.
Exactly.
What is of more importance to us in this country at a time like this?
And I would like to say, Sele, if you should read in between the lines of this news, you understand that these politicians that are overwhelming dealers with demand, it means they know what is about to happen. Because it doesn't make sense for me that election is about to come. These politicians are looking for a way to protect themselves. You can see that it's saying experts worry over killing and kidnapping. And we know that these are the people with the money running this country, these politicians. They are the ones that will sponsor talks here and there, try to cause confusion. We know how the system works. There's no too much talk on that. For the fact that they are worried like this, it means they know what they are cooking for each other. So because you know the plan that you're having, you're protecting yourself in case someone is having that plan for you. That's how I see this news.
Of course, that is just what it looks like. So I hope that we'll actually check more, and I hope that they are following the guidelines that actually, govern campaign, because we know there are do's and don'ts. And I hope that the INEC will actually have police that will checkmate that all these rules are being followed at the end of the day. We're still on the Punch newspaper in Nigeria at 62, and ASU strike now, Khan tells the federal government. And the paper is rounding up with the weekly security review too, which you can actually check on the downside of the Punch newspaper. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, PFN disowns Northern Bishops meeting with Tinubu as more disquiet try APC campaign cancel. You can read that story on page 6. Harvard University to honor Chimamanda with W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. You can read more of that story on page 2. And the big story, more airlines depart empty as charges rejection stifle export. And the writer for that story, air freight import to export ratio slumps to 87 to 13. And then stakeholders condemn overseas ban of local yam, beans, smoked fishes, ginger, and others. Regulators squeak under staff shortage, multiple guidelines, poor compliance with standards. Single guidelines, better cooperation imperative, says FAAN and NPZA. And $223 million Abacha loot. Sarab sues Buhari Malami over failure to publish pact with US. You can read more of that story on page 3. And HURIWA fly Sanwo-Olu over suffocating taxation. You can read that story on page 5. Obasanjo, Okonjo-Iweala, and others decry absence of purposeful leadership in Nigeria. More of that story on page 4. Police retires, denounce SGF, urges National Assembly to pass pension bill. More of that story on page 7. And there's a picture story where you can see the struggle or whatever the airlines are facing at this moment. And that's all the news on The Guardian.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think at this moment we would like to take a break where we can open the phone lines for our callers and let us call us and let us hear what you feel about Nigeria celebrating 62, and also the demand for the bulletproof cars, mostly by politicians, as suppliers are crying about that, and what most of people are also saying concerning if Nigeria is still the giant of Africa. So we really love to hear from you. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International, and we've been looking at various stories that have been trending on our paper 2 days to the campaigns, and also Nigeria to celebrate 62 years of independence. So we really love to hear, what do you think Nigeria have achieved for the past 62 years that we've been independent? Are we truly independent? We really love to hear from you. And remember, our phone lines are displayed on your screen, so you can call us and also drop your comment on our official Facebook and YouTube pages. I'm Sele, and Richard is still here with me. Thank you, Richard, for doing this.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, let's go further to other papers, and I'll be taking the Metrics newspaper. And on 2023, Ayu must go, protest hit Castina. But I do not know why we're still going back and forth concerning this. I think it will be noble and also of great advantage if Ayu would just step down, because he actually categorically said that if the presidential candidate emerged from the north, he will actually step down. So wonder if this is a test of federalism, because if we really want to, celebrate Nigeria as being a federal system of government and also democracy, then I think it would be right that he step down so that the party can move forward, and also so that it can actually be a true test that truly we're celebrating and actually having independence in Nigeria. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed. We can see a group have actually gone in Castina to ask him to step down, despite the fact that I is from the north. So we know what that means at a point like this. So we hope that we'll be able to put everything in order before. And we have another story here. Nigeria not ripe to allow citizens to bear arms. This is coming from the NSCDC boss. Well, we'll look into that and see if truly we are not really ripe to actually have arms. Nigeria Economy Center presidential debate to hold November, and I really look forward to this debate. We really need to see what they have to say. Still on 2023, again, APC Muslim ticket draws flag. We have not shifted position. This is coming from the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria. We have the ex-SGF Lawan talks tough, says Tinubu has thrown away presidency, which was within reach. Tragedy as 7 passengers are born to death in bus accident in Lagos State. 25% pension savings for mortgage, good move towards addressing housing deficit. This is coming from the MBAN. And Transmission Company of Nigeria is not up for sale, Bureau of Public Enterprises. So you can look up that story from the Metrics newspaper. And we can see a picture story here, the Lagos State governors, the predecessors and the successor in a meeting. The APC presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu, NDLEA chairman and former military administrator of Lagos State in Abuja. They are actually having a meeting, and I hope that this brings something very great for Nigeria. The last story here, police clamp down on oil theft as operatives seize 123 oil tankers and others. And that's all on the Metrics newspaper.
On the Daily Times, Naira stables amid external reserve decline of $203.5 million in 6 days. You can read more of that on page 3. RAP sues Buhari over $23 million Abacha loot. 6 copy of agreement with the US. You can read more of that story on page 5. Still on 2023 election, Tinubu APC out to shortchange Christians. Ex-SGF Babachir Lawal alleges. You can read more of that on page 2. And the big story on the Daily Times, still on 2023 election, PFN, Keyamo clash over Bishop's visit to Tinubu. Northern bishops who met with Tinubu are on their own, says PFN. Pastors are to lead people to salvation, not preach politics. This is coming from KMO, and you can read more of that story on the Daily Times. And on the left side of the paper, don't make the mistake of voting killers. Jonathan charges Nigerians. On the 22nd independence anniversary, brighter future awaits Nigeria. This is coming from Osibajo. and he had 8 years to give us a little bit of light, and he is not. And when he's going, he's telling us that there's a brighter future for Nigeria. When you had the opportunity to show us a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel and you didn't do anything, and this makes us wonder, are we going to keep believing these people, or would they, just because they're good with words, just sway us into believing what they have to say, but when they come they don't do anything, and they are leaving and they are assuring us of something that they should have started? This is sad, but then what can we do about it than just to hear them and agree? And still on the Daily Times, Buhari rules corrosive effect of corruption in Africa. And on the downside of the paper, transmission company of Nigeria is not up for sale. This is coming from BPE, and you can read that report on page 2. And that's all the news on the Daily Times.
Still on the Nation newspaper, anti-oil theft. IG confirmed the seizure of the 123 vessels, which you can find on page 6. Can president to youths, don't be politicians' body shield. And I hope that our youth actually take this into cognizance and be very, very careful. Why we have not endorsed Peter Obi. This is coming from the Ohanezes. You can read on page 5. Oyetola Adeleke trade wars as tribunal begins sittings. And petrol subsidy hit 2.57 trillion naira as supply rises by 10%. 7 doctors undergoing trial over misconduct. National Working Committee over the 10 billion naira nomination fees. The writers say members complain about depreciation of cash to 1 billion naira. Controversy over bribery lingers. Okowa seeks Saraki's intervention over Wike's threat to boycott presidential campaigns. And we have anxiety as CBN set to rise interest rates to new high. So you can actually read that on page 4. Downside of the paper, court fixed Wednesday for judgment in Machines versus Lawan case, which you can also read on the Nation newspaper. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On this day newspaper, in quest for increased FDI, federal government sets up oil gas investment promotion center. OPTS member companies pay tens of billions of dollars to Nigeria in 60 years. You can continue reading that on page 5. NNPCL spent 94.7% of August oil gas revenue on petrol subsidy. More of that report on page 6. Akwa Ibom APC senatorial ticket, Opedom to appeal judgment favoring Akpabio. More of that on page 49. This is coming from the PDP will emerge stronger, victorious despite crisis. You can continue reading what he has to say on page 5. And the big story on this day, 152 days to 2023 polls will be set to disrupt deadlock presidential run. This day's survey predicts inconclusive poll as first ballot of election were held today to launch major poll in October with renowned global partners. And that's all the news on this day.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. We have a presidential economic blueprint that said 100 million Nigerians living in poverty won't provide revenue. This is coming from Peter Obi. And possibly if they won't provide the revenue, then we have to look for another way to get revenue in Nigeria. So we would love to hear what the Labour Party candidate has to say on how he intends to create revenue in Nigeria. So you can look up that on page 14 of the Vanguard newspaper. And on 2023, we want to produce next governor. This is coming from Kogi. Christians really want to brace up and do what is only proper. So we'll look up to see how the governorship election will look like in Kogi State. Don't vote for killers in 2023. Jonathan charges Nigerians. And we have the writer says Tinubu desperate procuring fake Christian groups. This is coming from Baba Che Lawan. And we have the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, or can dictate to APC. This is coming from Kenyamu. Why Buhari directed exclusive of Ozibanjo Mustafa from the campaign council. Kwara South stakeholders protest exclusion from the campaign council. And we have APC irresponsible, don't deserve re-election. This is coming from the Labour Party, where I hope that they all focus on doing their campaign and stop talking about other parties as they actually look for solicit for votes come 2023. And we have a graph here. Federal government deficit shoots skyward by 128% to 3.6 trillion naira. The writers say all revenue heads in huge decline. This is coming from the budget office. Says measures are now in place for recovery. Current fiscal policy trajectory is unsustainable. This is coming from analysts. And we can see the federal government actual versus projected revenues in the first quarter of 2022. So we can look up the VAT, the currency, and all that the federal government was able to project in the first half. Still on insecurity, Nigeria passes through hard times. This is coming from UN. So you can look up on page 12. Serap sues federal government for refusing to publish the Abacha's $23 million loot agreement, which we all look forward to that, that publish to come up, because we really need to see what that money has been used for thus far. And the PDP crisis, Atiku reaches out, moves to break Wiki's ranks, which you can read on page 5. Displaced Taraba communities beg federal government and state government for assistance. No plan to sell TCN. This is coming from the BPE. And from ASU, resorting to litigation will prolong the strike. This is coming from Parents and NAS, which you can read on page 8. And that is all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty, still on insecurity, Nigeria not ripe for citizens to bear arms. Babachi Lawa undermining goodwill of northern Christians. This is coming from Dati. And still on the 2023 election, northern traditional rulers, retired military officers bag Atiku. And the big story, outgoing APC governors fume over list of Tinubu's campaign council. Threatens sabotage. Some outgoing governors of the ruling All Progressive Congress has threatened to sabotage the presidential campaign of their party and its candidate Bola Tinubu in their respective states. And Buhari honors Emir of Zauzau Ahmed Nuhu Bamili with CFR. Still on the 2023 election, APC irresponsible, doesn't deserve re-election, says Peter Obi. And on insecurity, hold parley with IPOB, Yoruba agitators and bandits. International Human Rights Commission urges Buhari. And on the downside of the paper, still on insecurity, panic in Katsina community as terrorists demand 250 million naira ransom for 43 kidnapped residents. And still on the Kaduna train terror attack victims countdown is 181 days in captivity. And that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
Let's take a look at the Abuja Inquirer paper, and it says why Catholic Church won't stop speaking for Nigeria. This is coming from the Abuja Bishop. Land swap, FCTA begins land reclamation in Jawa Chiefdom. And hard times, FCTA distributes grains to residents, which is really, the right step in the right direction to actually associate with those that are in need. And I think this is should not just remain in the capital, that's in Abuja, but should also, spread to other states that will do same for one another. Nasarawa State Varsity resumes Monday, September 26, which is today. Why rapists deserve castration. This is coming from the FIDA president. The big story here, 29 billion naira ground rent, FCTA to prevent debtors from disposing of properties. Consent letter now required. And you can actually read Inside Life of Abuja Big Boy Alleged Kidnapper, which you can read on page 11. We have a picture story here, so you do well to get the Inquirer and read any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Nigerian Tribune, NDLEA arrests 75-year-old man, 21 others over drug seized in 7 states. Intercept 1,000 1,001,387 bottles of opioids Alcura. This is, you can read more of that story on page 27. Pencom approves 25% withdrawal from RSA balance as equity contribution for mortgage. You can read more of that on page 7. And the big story on Nigerian Tribune, still on the 2023 polls, states to watch as campaign kick off this week. You can read more of that on page 2. I have no political deal with Adebuta Ogun PDP, says Amosun. You can read more of that story on page 24. PDP APC bikers as Osun Tribunal begins sitting. You can read more of that on page 24. Ofeni Louts Okeredulo overstands on true federalism. More of that story on page 3. Flood sacks Kogi. FEMA asks residents of Abuja flood prone to relocate. You can read more of that on page 26. And on the downside of the paper, at the 62nd Independence Anniversary Service, Khan says the wicked shall not rule Nigeria. More of that on page 4. 7 burned to death in Lagos bus accident. You can read all of that on page 26. And that's all this news and story on Nigerian Tribune.
All right, I would like to round it up with the National Economy newspaper. And we can see the currency buying, selling, inflation rate of 2022, 2021, and commodity prices, which you can read that of US dollar, pounds, Europe, and CBN exchange as 23rd of September 2022. So you can look that up. And we have the 2023 election campaign. Tough economic questions incoming president must answer. How will Nigerian next president tackle oil subsidy, forex, power, and other issues? And I think this is really a question that should be asked during that debate. We really need to know how do they intend to tackle the oil subsidy, because if we say by next year, June, we're going to stop paying oil subsidy, we need to know what the president is hoping to do that. Talk about our forex. What are we going to do about that? Presently, our in-era, we don't know if it's really going to be usable, how Nigerians are going to benefit from it, especially the common man. What does he stand to gain at the end of the day? Take a look at power. We mentioned these coals. We're seeing even TCN is saying that they are not up for sale. Some of our power plants have been shut down because they are no longer working or they are idle. That is what the federal government has saying. So we need to know what they are hoping to do that. And finally, other issues, education, strike, insecurity, which is very, very important that they should actually, give us answers. So we need to know what they are hoping to do. And I hope that they are actually listening and they are bracing up for not just during the debate to speak, but then that they are bracing up for what they hope to put on ground for Nigerians to know that they are really serious come 2023.
I hope so.
Downside of the paper, we see path to single digit inflation. This is coming from experts. Where to invest your money now, part 2. You can read that on page 4. Top 10 African countries by the GNI per capita. The last story here, making life annuity attractive for retirees, which you can reach on page 21. And that is all on national economy and also how far we can go on the program. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, our viewers.